In the room it sounded pretty similar. Obviously when I'm hearing that mic'd, it's not sounding that similar at all to me. So this is my Fender Princeton. This is a Line6 Helix with the PowerCab 112. The speaker in my Princeton is a Cannabis Rex, made from only the finest hemp available. And it just so turns out that within the PowerCab, there exists a speaker model called the Dino, which is actually modeling the Cannabis Rex. So I think you guys see where this is going. So I'm going to be comparing these 4 different ways. The first one's just going to be a guitar straight into the Princeton, the actual amplifier. No effects or anything going in, no post-recording effects, no EQ, no compression, anything like that. Just going to be the signal that I'm getting right out of the amp. To mic it, I am going to be using this SM57. I am using this because the Helix also includes an SM57 as one of the microphones that it can model. So that's going to be the first part of this. The second part is going to be running the Princess model, so the model based off the Princeton within the Helix, but I'm just going to be running the amp head in the Helix, and then I'm going to be running that to the PowerCab and using that to do the speaker simulation. So obviously since I have a Cannabis Rex within my actual amp, I'm going to be using the Dino setting on my PowerCab and see where that gets us. So I'm going to do this section, I guess, 2 different ways. One of them I'm going to actually mic. I'm going to mic the PowerCab. I'm going to try to get this mic in this as close to the position as possible of what I did the actual amp with. And I'm going to compare those 2 sounds. The thought being if the Princeton within the Helix sounds like the actual Princeton amplifier portion, and then the actual PowerCab speaker modeling the Dino sounds anything like the actual speaker within the actual amp, I should be able to get a fairly similar signal by putting the mic in the same spot. So I'm going to try that, and then within that, kind of the third comparison is going to be there's an option to put a line out from the PowerCab, and you can just run that straight into the front of house, or in this case I'm going to be running it right into my DAW. But with the line out option, there's an option for a mic. So I'm going to select the SM57 for that. We might see some variance there, but we're going to have to wait and see. And the fourth and final comparison is just going to be the Helix itself with the Helix stock cab for the Princess. I'm not going to be using the PowerCab at all. I'm just going to be going straight from the Helix into my DAW and see if we can get that to compare as well. I'm actually out of time for today, so I'm going to come back tomorrow with fresh ears and give these a listen and see how they all compare. All right, so I'm back. Let's take a listen, see what we think. actual thing. That's the actual Princeton. Sounds really good. I kind of tried to dial it in right at a point where it's not breaking up. It's still pretty clean, but if I really dug into it, it'd break up just a tiny bit. Almost like even if you plugged in a guitar with humbuckers instead of single coil, it'd start to break up a little bit. I had the bass and the treble both just directly at noon, just right at 5. Everything else was off. All the tremolo and the reverb were completely off. So that was the kind of the tone I had dialed in for the Princeton. And it sounds really good just through a simple SM57. You can tell it's starting to compress. The amp's being pushed a little bit, and you can definitely hear the compression on that track. But overall, it sounds good. I really like how that sounds, so we will see how the others compare to it. So that's the PowerCab 112. That's the actual mic'd signal you're hearing. So that's an SM57 in front of the PowerCab, which I know that defeats the purpose of the PowerCab. You're not supposed to have to mic them because they're modeling all of that for you. But for the sake of this, I really wanted to see how it sounded. And I'll be honest, out of the 4 different sounds I got from this, the 4 different signals I got from this, I like that one the least. It sounds a little bit thin to me. You can definitely tell the model amp is not getting quite as much compression as the actual Princeton was. So I didn't recognize that at that point. I actually, in the final section, I turned the sag up a little bit in the Helix on the settings to try to kind of account for that. But when I was dialing in the sound that I was trying to match with the Helix and the Dino setting on the PowerCab, I was just going off of my ear in the room. So I was trying to get that to sound as similar as possible to the actual Princeton as I could, just from sitting in the room tweaking the knobs and the values. So in the room it sounded pretty similar. Obviously when I'm hearing that mic'd, it's not sounding that similar at all to me. Definitely a little bit more thin, not quite as much low end. Even the mids aren't cutting through as much. Not honestly my favorite tone, but I do think with a little bit of tweaking, after hearing that, I could probably still get it to sound pretty similar to the actual thing. So let's go ahead and listen to the PowerCab. Just instead of being mic'd this time, we're going to listen to the signal that was coming just out of the line out from the back of the PowerCab. So what we're hearing there is still coming from the PowerCab, but instead of the mic, the actual microphone this time, we're hearing the modeling within the PowerCab modeling an SM57. And I made a point to make sure when the mic was set up, it was at an inch away from the grill cloth, the grill cover there. And then obviously when I set up the settings for the line out, I had that mic also being set to be an inch away. And I like that sound a little bit more than the actual mic signal that we just listened to prior to this. It sounds a little bit fuller to me, just a little bit more filled out. That could possibly be just due to where I had the mic placed when I was miking the PowerCab. I was kind of trying to go halfway between the center of the cone and the outside of the cone, but there's no way to tell within the Helix where the mic models are being placed. You can tell how far away they are, but you don't actually have any idea where within the cone they're miking that sound. So that could explain the differences. That signal itself was exactly the same in the sense that I was just playing one take and tracking it twice. I had one track coming out with the actual microphone. The other track was coming out of the back of the PowerCab just as a line out. So playing literally the exact same part, obviously just a little bit different sound just due to the how it was being processed there internally. But overall, I do like that sound. Absolutely something I would use if I was playing a gig and wanted a clean Princeton sound. Just plug into the Helix, plug into the PowerCab, and go straight from the back of that to the front of the house. So definitely like that sound. Let's listen to just the straight Helix, no PowerCab, no actual speaker in the room. This is just going to be straight from the Helix into my DAW. So that's the actual Helix, just straight into the DAW. No speaker of any kind in the room. So I was just using the stock cab within the Helix. I was using the 1x12 Princess. So just simulating a 12-inch speaker within an actual Princeton. It sounds a little bit different for sure than my actual Princeton. Part of that could be due to the fact that the Princeton I have has a Dino, or not a Dino. The Princeton I have has a Cannabis Rex as its speaker. So it's going to be a little bit different than a regular stock 12-inch speaker within a Princeton, which is what the Helix is modeling. But overall, I do like the sound. I had to push the sag quite a bit in that last one to kind of try to get to match that compressed tone. It definitely isn't all the way there as far as an amp being driven to the point of compression, but it's close. Maybe a little bit muddier than I would like. I feel like the take I did with the actual tube amp just had a little bit more clarity in it. But overall, the Helix, it sounds great. Definitely something I could use. I think in a mix, if you had this recorded with other instruments, with just a tiny bit of tweaking, you're not even going to be able to tell a difference between this Helix and the real thing. So overall, I'm super thrilled with how these turned out. Obviously, the actual tube amp sound will always be the benchmark that we rate the Helix and other modeling software against, but it held up pretty well. I was really impressed with how close the sounds were. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, what your thoughts were on how similar or how different they were, if it was what you expected or not what you expected. Anyways, I appreciate you guys watching this, taking the time to go through this little demonstration and experiment with me. It's pretty amazing what the Helix and the PowerCab can do. They definitely get close to the real thing. Once again, thank you for watching. My name is Steve Harms. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to the channel, and we will catch you all in the next lesson.